Good morning, everyone. My name is Bryce. I am the Senior Marketing Manager at asTech. Thank you all so much for joining us for this month's asTech Industry Pulse, behind the scenes of vehicle calibrations. I'm with our experts here at one of our calibration centers where they're going to walk you through what it takes to set up for a calibration, actually performing a live calibration with a TruPoint, and discussing asTech's calibration solutions for your shop. We will wrap it up with a Q&A session. There's a link in the chat as well as the webinar invite. That is where you're able to submit your questions. And from there, I will let our experts take it from here.
Thanks, Bryce.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Andy Noyes. I'm Vice President of Account Management and do some field operations tasks with asTech. And like Bryce said, we're here to talk about everything calibration today, right? Because one of our companies that asTech owns or Repairify owns is asThink. Last year, we scrubbed just over 2 million vehicles. And what that data has shown is that 40% of the car park that you're fixing requires a calibration. And on those vehicles, they're averaging almost 1.5 calibrations per vehicle. So if you're not in this business now, like this freight train is coming, and there's not a better time to start figuring out how you can integrate this and eliminate some sublet vendors, right? Because it's all going to be about reducing cycle time and reducing rental car days so you can perform better on your programs. And joining me today is Michael Terry.
I'm a manager of operations here at Repairify, and today we're going to show you and walk through a eyesight calibration, cooking show style, if you will, with the TruPoint and the all-in-one here. Talk about some of the things that we look for and some of the setup that we're doing whenever we do this, right? Whenever we get into calibrations, or when we start a calibration, we want to make sure that the vehicle's prerequisites are met. And they change a little bit varying on the make and manufacturer, right? So we always want to check the OE service instructions to make sure that we've got them covered. But in most cases, you want to make sure that your tire pressure is good. You want to make sure that your fuel level is good. A lot of the manufacturers require a full tank of fuel. I know that there's some companies out there that will guess by trying to put weights in the back of the vehicle. It's hard to do that, right? You can't say that just half a tank's going to weigh this much. So we go to the easier solution, which is going ahead and filling up the gas tank. Want to make sure that the vehicle's load is empty. So if you have a big stereo system in the back of the truck or the back of the vehicle, or a bunch of groceries, or if you're just a pack rat, you want to make sure all that stuff gets out. And the reason that that's important is the ride height, right? If we've got a car that's loaded heavily in the back, your sensors in the front of the vehicle are going to be pointed up. Or if you've got a car that's fully evenly loaded, the whole car is pointing down or squatted while the vehicle is, the sensors are going down low, right? One of the other things that we really want to touch base whenever we're doing a calibration or anything electronic with the vehicle is make sure that it's battery supported, right? We're not going to have this one hooked up because we're doing the cooking show deal, right? We're going to show you real quickly how to do this, but we want to make sure that the battery is supported on these vehicles and the windshield's clean. So this particular vehicle, we're going to be doing eyesight on it, right? So the camera's behind the glass. If we were doing radar, like say on a Toyota, we would want to make sure that the emblem's clear or whatever's in front of the radar is clear and clean, because the vehicle needs to see, or the sensors need to see through that stuff. So I'm going to clean this windshield real quick. Doesn't take much, right?
Since this is my car, Michael, you can go ahead and clean the whole windshield, not just the camera.
I bet you would appreciate that. All right, she's nice and good. One of the other things to call out whenever you're looking at vehicles is sometimes tint, stickers. We want to make sure that those aren't covering up the cameras, right? So we want to make sure that even though it may have worked pre-accident, that the stuff is removed before we get into it. Because once we put a car into calibration, if that stuff's in the way, it won't complete the calibration and it may get stuck. Let me set this aside real quick. All right, so as we're getting into it, we're going to put the wheel targets on this vehicle. One of the cool things about this technology, it's real similar to a lot of aftermarket technology, is the machine knows where it's at. It just needs to be told where the vehicle's at. So we're going to put these markers on all four wheels, making sure to get them nice and snug. And that's pretty standard across all the aftermarket stuff. So we've got them on all four here. I just showed you the one there. And now we're going to go and we're going to put the vehicle into the machine. So TruPoint offers a VIN scan solution. Kind of like your self-checkout that we love so much. The scanner works about as much as the self-checkout does, right? So we've got options in case it doesn't. The VIN is going to be located in most cases in the door jamb of the driver's door. Next to that's going to be the tire placard. So when you're doing the tire pressure, if you're unsure of what the tire pressure should be, it's going to be noted right here in the vehicle. So this one we're going to scan. Should pop up on the screen over there. All right, on this particular one, we've called out that it's a Subaru 23 Legacy sedan. We're going to do front camera on this one. It's going to call out the area in front of a vehicle. If you notice here, this one's calling out 5 meters by 4 meters in front of the vehicle, which we could probably put that in a service bay or an alley in a body shop, right? This particular vehicle, if you're doing cameras, doesn't require a whole lot of space. Also is going to call out the Subaru target. So this one's called the Subaru FC01. There's one that's got a white bottom to it, and there's one that's got a black bottom. We commonly refer to this one as the black bottom target. So once we've selected that that's all good, we know that our prerequisites are met, right? We're going to hit next. I've done this too many times, so the machine put itself right where it needed to be before we even got started. But typically, we would move that machine into place until it was green. I'll show you that here in a second. The next step here is a really important part that we want to make sure that we're checking, whether it be with the TruPoint or any other system, is the thrust angle of the vehicle. So if the sensors aren't pointed in the same direction as the vehicle's traveling down the road, we may have an issue. Say you've got a car that says it's going straight, but it may be off a little bit, it may see oncoming traffic, and it may slam on the brakes. That could be a catastrophic event, right? Or an unexpected result. So I'm going to go over here, stick the sucker in neutral. It may get louder for you guys on the phone. Give me just a second. All right, so at this point, the machine knows where it's at. It knows where the 4 targets are on the wheel. And we're going to do the thrust angle check. I got a little ahead of myself. So make sure when you're doing the thrust angle check, when you're pushing forward, we're not pushing down on the vehicle and we're not pulling up on the vehicle. I'm taking my knee into the back of the bumper here. I'm slightly pushing forward. She put herself out of gear. There we go.
Michael, since I'm looking at the screen here, what are you looking at to know when to stop the rolling comp?
So the cameras that are looking at the targets have little green and red lights right where Andy's hand was that'll tell me where to go. And it just told me to stop there. Now it's telling me to back up. So I'm going to back up 50 degrees, I believe. Making sure not to lift. I'm pulling straight back on this wheel arch until I get a stop. And then going back forward 25 degrees. Making sure to move slow. This is an important part. Once I'm there, the screen's telling me to lock the tires down. Can do wheel chocks. The electronic emergency brake works really well as well. All right. How's the machine look over there, Andy?
Well, it did exactly what you just said. It told us to lock the vehicle down, what you did. So I'm going to hit next. Oh, you're blocking the targets there. Yep.
It likes to see all 4 corners all the time before it moves to the next spot.
All right, now it wants you to do the advanced floor level compensation check.
So this is what I was going to get into before I got ahead of myself a little bit, is it knows where the machine is. It knows where the 4 corners of the car are, but it doesn't necessarily know where the ground is. And if you're familiar with land surveying, this is the next step that we're doing here. I'm going to set this marker on the ground at the 4 points. It's going to grab it and tell me to move to the next spot, real similar to what it was doing when I was doing the alignment check. Go to the back left, put it on the ground.
And Michael, if I remember correctly, with this particular piece of equipment, it has the ability to adjust out up to 4 degrees of variance from the plane where the car is sitting, right?
Absolutely, it does. Now, if we're adjusting up to 4 degrees, that's a big tilt, right? But it can do it. All right, we good?
We're good.
We're good. All right, at this point, it's telling me it's checking the alignment check. It's checking the ground, and it should give us a go-ahead. If it's not good, you'll see a big red screen on there. and this one gave us the go-ahead. So I've got the call out here that I'm doing the front camera. It's showing again in a little gray box here exactly the space needed to be free in front of the vehicle. If we're doing cameras, it's really a line of sight, right? We want to make sure that the vehicle, the angle that it's looking at is clear. And in this particular target, what I'm getting ready to show you, let me show you the next screen, is going to be the target itself. And the target on most of these, like you can see in the background behind me, are black and white targets. So if we've got stuff that are behind the target that we're shooting that's black and white on the back side of the shop, right? We may want to cover those up or think of those as potential problems. So I'm going to move the machine back. This next position that I'm moving it to is the actual desired position for the OE calibration. That first setup was just the setup to get the vehicle into the machine. Kind of a flight simulator here. When I get close, it'll turn yellow. Once I get real close to that yellow, I can lock the machine down, hit the clutch, and then do a fine adjustment. And if you're good at video games, you might be good at this. All right, I'm gonna let it settle down. You see it's wiggling a little bit right there. And the reason we let it settle down is because in calibrations, it's a game of millimeters when we're doing tolerances, right? A lot of the call outs are only plus or minus 2, 3, 5 millimeters. So making sure the machine's settled, making sure that your target's in the right position, very important stuff. All right, we're gonna slide it up. As I get closer, it will turn yellow and then green when I am within tolerance, which is that couple millimeters I was just talking about. There we go. Let her settle down. All right. One of the other cool things here about this is I've got the target called out here, and for the target to be able to fit on our machine here, I've got to move these brackets that we kind of see on the front of the machine that I'm getting ready to show you. There's tape that I can look down, but this has actually got a potentiometer in it. So I can actually, as I'm sliding it, it's telling me which direction to go. Andy, see if you can slide that one over. There we go. And when we're where it needs to be, it turns green. Oh. There we go. You guys can see it a little bit better that way. There we go. And that's 633 millimeters off the center. And then I'm going to walk over here and move this out of your way so you guys can see what I'm grabbing. This is what I was referring to as the Subaru black bottom target. This is going to be for most of your newer Subarus. There's also a white bottom target that I have seen people get confused whenever they're doing these calibrations for the first time. They see one that looks similar to what they see on the screen. Want to make sure we're grabbing the right one, right? Got a part number that calls out there plus a picture on the screen. We're going to flip it out here in place. It only goes on there one way. It keys onto this machine, so you can't put it upside down, backwards, inside out, right?
So you're saying even Andy could do it?
Even Andy can do it. The idea here was to put hopefully a lower skilled position in front of this, right? Because the solution before this was an OE solution, which was lasers, plumb bobs, strings, right? It took a higher skilled tech a lot more time to do it. Does it look good?
It just right on the side here.
So when you're putting this board on place, it can knock those adjustments out just a little bit. Andy's making the fine adjustments, locking it down to make sure it doesn't move.
Green is good.
Green is good. Perfect. At this point, we're going to hit next. Everything is good at this point. We've got the target at its height, right? And it's not, if we were to put this at the, Edwin, if you want to show this other camera real quick. Yeah, perfect. If we were to measure here for the OE target, it should be 1 meter to this line right here. But because we're compensating for a floor that's unlevel, it's going to be slightly adjusted, right? That's the magic in this machine, is it can adjust for an unlevel surface. So at this point, we would hook up the all-in-one, or what your solution is for calibrations, and submit it for calibrations.
Yeah, so to Michael's point earlier, kind of the cooking show method, we're not going to necessarily submit this one because Subaru performs dual calibrations, right? So we have a static portion followed by a dynamic portion. That dynamic portion on average can take 45 plus minutes, and I personally don't want to go do that after this webinar, so we're going to skip that part. But important thing about Subaru calibrations, and particularly one of the things I'm proud of is asTech, right? Like, we're going to make sure we do both pieces to document the full calibration and the success, because for Subaru particular, when we fire the eyesight static calibration, it's going to come back with a percentage of past completion, which could be anywhere from upper 80s to, we have seen 99%, although that's very rare. But then after you do that, Subaru says in their OE service information, you have to initiate the dynamic portion, and you're looking for a parameter identification code, what we call a PID code, to change to a certain level in the tool to validate the dynamic side of the calibration. So if that never progresses to that point, you will not have a completed, validated, calibration per Subaru standards. And that's really important for us, right? Because part of what we're doing behind this calibration is we're going to warranty and indemnify it, and we put $31 million worth of coverage behind that event. So we're going to make sure we follow the process all the way through so it's complete. So if you're using somebody today, I always like to call out, number one, parking lot's never a good thing with any camera calibration. But number two, if they're shooting that static piece, driving it around the block for a minute and throwing the keys back at you, more than likely, that's not long enough for that PID code to have changed to that certain status, right? So it's really important to know who you're working with and the validation of that work, right? Like I like to say, if you're using Chuck and Chuck owns a truck and he doesn't do it right and something goes wrong, you can sue Chuck and get his truck. But
Exactly.
But we're going to come to the table with a little bit more.
So Andy alluded to a couple of things that we want to keep in mind whenever we're doing calibrations, right? We don't necessarily want to be shooting targets, camera targets outside. Lighting is very crucial whenever you're doing a static calibration, a camera static calibration. The bare minimum in our research is about 700 to 800 lumens, which if you look into that is quite bright, right? We want to make sure that it's a nice even light, that shadows aren't cast over the target. A lot of times we have seen with this particular target, if it's real bright behind it and there's a slight shadow on there, right, it could strongly affect that. As I was alluding to before, this is a black and white target. All of our camera targets are black and white. If you have a busy area behind it that's black and white, that could cause an issue, right? It's not necessarily that when calibrations go right, they go quick and they go easy. It's when they go wrong is when things get sticky. So keeping some things in mind whenever you're doing calibrations that'll help you diag when things aren't going right. Keep it in mind that the camera's a visual thing, right? So when you're doing the dynamic, as Andy was talking about, it may take 45 minutes to do this Subaru. We've had a worst case scenario. We're up in Alaska, and Alaska gets a lot of snow. If you can't see the lines on the road, if you can't see the road, the camera can't either. We had a particular instance up there where that dynamic calibration on the Subaru needed to be done during a heavy snowfall. There was only one pass in between Anchorage and another town. I'm not too familiar with Alaska, but one pass that they were keeping plowed regularly. So our guy had to go down the pass, turn around and come back. It took him 8 hours to do that dynamic calibration. So keep that in mind, right? With the dynamic stuff, if you can't see the road, if you're struggling, so is the camera. So keep that in mind when you're doing it.
Yeah, in terms of solutions and how we can help shops perform the calibrations, we really have, well, there's like four kind of key things. So number one, we have an in-shop technician model. So today we have about 150 asTech technicians that we've placed in customer environments where we just own this process. So whether the customer just doesn't have the labor to dedicate to doing it, or they want somebody on site, like whatever the issue is, but we will place, we hire, recruit, and train an in-shop technician. We place them in the customer's environment. We really embed them into your workflow, right? Like we want them to be a part of your production meetings, know what cars need what, to understand, to make sure that we're just performing all those calibrations for you. Secondly, we have what we looked at today. Like we have TruPoints that we have placed in customer environments on a subscription type program, but we will place an asTech owned asset, right? So we own these. The TruPoints we have integration into the Altus cloud so we can see target height, distance. We need to make sure that we can validate that the target was placed in the correct position by your employee. We'll come in when we drop off the piece of equipment, and we will train your staff, typically 2 people, on the calibration equipment, number 1, and then we put them in reps of how to set up and perform the work. And then number 3, we need them to understand what to do when it goes wrong and how to overcome some environmental failures, right? Like to Michael's point, he talked about having colored walls. There was another place, we were in a cold weather state in the Northeast, and we placed a TruPoint, and I believe it was a Subaru target. They had a heater in the background, and whenever that heater kicked on, it was enough airflow that it would move that TruPoint target, and you'd have to shut the heater off in order to fire off the static calibration, right? So we teach your staff kind of how to overcome and look at these environmental type issues that can cause an issue. Number 3, if we're using ADAS Think in your location and you're a heavy, typically domestic, right? Domestic vehicles require a lot of dynamic calibrations, but if your vehicle mix makes up more dynamics, we have the ability to show you just how to get started with the ease of performing dynamics, which is no equipment. And lastly, we have a local calibration kit. So the manufacturer of our all-in-one tool makes calibration equipment. We can turn on the ADAS functionality on the all-in-one tool, and then you'll have an integrated solution for target setup that you can do, and those targets would be your asset, right? So you're buying those from us. We would sell you the asset, you own it. There's some optional 360 targets that we can put with those. And then we offer training as well, which is optional, right? Because you may have somebody that's performed calibrations elsewhere that you've hired that knows what to do and they just need the equipment. Or you may have somebody that shows promise that just needs a good ADAS foundation. So we have a virtual setup, a virtual training option, which is really self-study, us validating the self-study, and then a 1-day webinar, kind of show, tell, do. And then the second option is you coming on to one of our sites, like right here in Irving, Texas, and we do a full week of training that's ICAR accredited, setting up the OEM style, right? So you're learning it the harder way, right? You're dropping the plumb bobs and measuring everything out. So then when you get back and you're using another piece of equipment, right, you'll understand the more difficult way to do it before you have another option.
Yeah, when you're doing the OE solution, it's a good solid base for a lifelong calibration tech, really to move into figuring out why calibrations go bad, right? Which is the big thing that we push during training, because shooting a target's easy, right? It's diagging when that target that isn't shooting.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So I think we'll open it up now to some questions. I know there was a link, I think, put in the chat at the beginning of this meeting, if you had any questions.
So starting off, how long does it take to perform a calibration? Andy, I'll let you go ahead and take that one.
Yeah, very complicated question. So there isn't just a standard, I would say, which is probably why like OEs and others haven't put labor standards to this work. So the one thing, like with this TruPoint that we demonstrated, if we were to go and set up a Mazda next, the whole setup procedure, the prerequisites, everything could be different, right? Then if you go to a Toyota, it's different. You need to understand what all those conditions are and how to work through them, right? And I think the important thing is, we talk about, calibrations, it's everything goes great when they go great, right? So meaning if you're replacing a windshield on a non-collision claim, you have a good quality piece of glass and you don't break the rain sensor, more than likely that car is going to calibrate fairly easy, right? But in collision, you're taking a vehicle that's absorbed energy, transferred that energy throughout the vehicle, and then you end up with these failures, right? And it's the complexity of those failures that you need to work through that really can take additional time and as you work through that process.
Speaking about energy transfer, one thing that I like to remind people or have people look up when you're thinking about energy transfer and accidents and sensors getting affected on the other side of the vehicle is when we're done with this meeting, jump on YouTube and Google Bel Air versus Malibu, right? It's a head-on collision between the two vehicles and it's slow motion. And you can see the energy as it passes through the vehicle and a front end hit, right? Just because it got hit here doesn't mean those sensors over there didn't get affected. So we want to make sure that all that stuff's checked out properly.
Great point, you guys. Thank you for sharing that. So another question came in. Can you tell us a little bit about our technician certifications and what it takes for them to be able to perform calibrations?
Yeah, so I'll go back to like the in-shop model we were talking about, right? So when we hire, recruit, and go to place a technician, from the time they start day one before they ever show up in a shop, it's going to be 3 weeks. So we're number one going to make sure that they're ICAR certified. Number two, they're going to be in our calibration centers working with staff to make sure they understand our processes and what our expectations are, right? So an example of that with Subaru and EyeSight, it is possible to get a static percentage below 85%. For us, that's unacceptable. Yeah. Like we're going to reshoot that until we can get it greater than 85%. And then, once we do have them placed in the shop, we spend a week with them on site, working with them as well. For our in-shop techs, as an example, we take anywhere from 20 to 60 photographs throughout the calibration process, right? Because as Michael talked about all those prerequisites, if it's a vehicle that has a requirement of that full tank of fuel, I'm taking a picture of the fuel gauge before, I'm taking a picture of the fuel receipt, I'm taking a picture of the full fuel tank, I'm going to take a picture of each tire with the tire pressure gauge attached. Like every step of that will be documented. And in addition to that, we also download the service procedure the day we perform the work, right? Because we've seen OEMs change requirements, change steps. And when that happens, I want to make sure I can prove that I did it to the OEM spec the day that we performed the work. So we have a very rigorous process that we put them through, and then accountability on the backside where we have QA auditing our folks and making sure that they're following all those standards.
It may seem a little labor intensive getting into the SI every single time, but it doesn't matter with our guys if they're doing 10 Toyota Camrys in a row. I still ask them to check the OE service instructions, right? We have seen Honda over the weekend changing service instructions. We've seen Toyota on a Tuesday in the middle of the day change service instructions, right? And we want to make sure that we get the latest, greatest service for you guys.
Another question came in. They said, can you talk about static and dynamic calibration? So I'm assuming they mean the difference between static and dynamic.
So yeah, static and dynamic. Static is going to be a controlled environment like we've got here with a target sitting in front of the vehicle. Lighting's controlled, your surroundings are in control, right? When you're looking at a dynamic, you can do that pretty much anywhere you can drive a vehicle. In most cases on the dynamic side, there's some minimum requirements. All of them need to be straight. Most of them have a speed limit to keep yourself within. A lot of them like to have light traffic. And signs and guardrails, those kind of things. But your dynamic's going to be press calibration, drive until it says it's done. Your static's going to be set up until you get a pass with once you shoot the computer, right?
I'll say one other thing too. I think with dynamics, as I was thinking about that, like Chrysler front radar, so Chrysler, Jeep, right, Dodge, all their brands, but they actually have a radar dongle you need to attach and kind of pre-level, right?
Yeah, it's a level that you put on the front of it, and it's the very first step, and a lot of people miss it because they just see dynamic and I can hit calibration and go. But if that sensor isn't checked out properly, it assumes that you have done that. If you've not done that first step, it will make your entire calibration process so much longer because it's assumed that you leveled it off, right? So on that particular one, you level it, you drive it until it says it passes, and then if it needs an adjustment, it says to adjust the top right screw a half of a turn, the bottom left screw a half of a turn counterclockwise, right? Make sure when you're doing those dynamics, you have that screwdriver with you so you can pull over in the parking lot and not have to go all the way back to the shop for that. But yeah, some of these dynamics are going to require some sort of level check before you get started, right?
Great question and great answer, you guys. Another question came in. It looks like these details are very specific. What if the car has aftermarket tires or lift kit? So basically vehicle modifications. How does that affect the accuracy of a calibration?
I'm going to let Michael take that one.
Yeah, so that's a fun question to answer, unfortunately, right? There's a lot of customers that come in with lifted trucks and tires. There is not very many manufacturers that allow for a ride height adjustment, right? Whether that be lowering, raising, leveling, putting bigger tires on it. Our general stance as Repairify is if it comes in with a modified suspension, we are not going to do it, right? There's one allowance that I can think of off the top of my head, and some of you guys out there might know differently, but TRD, Toyota Racing Development, has a lift that is specific to the Tacoma or the Tundra. It's a very expensive lift. It changes camber angles. It's an all-inclusive lift, right? And they have set up instructions for that lift in their OE service instructions, right? But if you go to BDS suspension lifts, right, and put a 6-inch lift on your car, if we put it into calibration mode and that manufacturer hasn't allowed for that, it may not calibrate. And then now the car is stuck in calibration mode. At that point, the only known solution that I can think of is to now lower the vehicle, put smaller tires on it, right? And if you're at a body shop, you don't have the OE suspension lift that it didn't come in with, right? So we want to keep that in mind.
And Michael, to your point, right? It's as you were saying that, like most cars, unless your radar was broken in the event of a front end accident and damaged, you're not going to have any warning lights on. But once you put it in calibration mode and you drive it and it's unsuccessful, that's when you actually like get lit up like the Christmas tree, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We look at it a lot like a smartphone, right? When you go to focus your whole family picture in there, we want to make sure that when we're hitting that target button, it's on the middle, right? And if the sensors and stuff are screwed up, it's not going to center up because the load has been adjusted.
A question came in. How would you adjust for having the hood up and battery supported when trying to shoot the target for the front camera?
Very good call out. There's a couple different ways to do it. Typically, if you snake the cable in underneath where the headlight is and shut it, you're not going to affect it that much. There are cases that might be a problem. And I know that sometimes we're sensitive when we get into dealing with cars that we don't want to have the body panels torqued. Another good solution that a lot of my guys do is they'll run in the extension cords through the back of the hood here, because there's a lot of times there's a gap there, and then we can put the hood down. Putting those cables on there, there's not a great solution, right? You're going to have to just kind of wiggle it around and see what works. But yeah, it's real important to get those batteries supported. You guys know as well as I do that, you know, body shops are where batteries go to die. By the time you guys have fixed it up and it's ready for calibration, the doors have been off, the dome lights have been on, all that good stuff. So we want to make sure we got a good solid connection. Anytime you're doing any kind of electronic event with a vehicle, whether it be calibration or programming or scanning, battery voltage is critically important. Nissan, I believe it's 11.7 to 11.6 volts or below. You're going to have an awful scan on that vehicle if you don't have it battery supported. So we really want to make sure as we get into the new technology and the newer vehicles, it's much more critical to have those batteries supported.
All right. What does pricing look like for calibrations, Andy?
So great question. So if anyone has, pricing questions, I could tell you, like, we can answer those one-on-one after this webinar. There's probably a whole lot more questions I need to ask and a discussion that we need to have together to be able to give you pricing, like our in-shop model, a TruPoint model, local calibration model, the dynamics, like all of those scenarios that we talked about are all priced in very different structures, but I'm more than happy to have those conversations, one-on-one after the webinar.
And I think this question might fall into that same one-on-one conversation, but somebody asked, how can we ensure the accuracy of the times and pricing? And what is the process for requesting adjustments through Repairify if needed?
So the time, pricing, and adjustment.
Yes.
I think I'd need to ask more additional questions to understand that one a little better. But I mean, what I will tell you is like we don't bill for a calibration event unless it's successfully completed. So like our technicians want to work with your car side technicians through whatever scenarios we need to make sure we have a past calibration event, right? So it's not uncommon if a vehicle is taking additional time that we actually get on a FaceTime call or a Teams meeting, or like we're exchanging pictures back and forth to try and understand what your environment looks like, some of those things we talked about, right? So, but you have our commitment that we're going to spend as much time as we need to make sure that it does pass. So.
And last question, and this is more of a wrap up for us. So a demonstration on the use of the new Lexus 360 targets would be amazing, not the vinyl, the targets. And I know that we have those. That's not what we were discussing today. But whoever submitted that question, we'd love to follow up with you on that. We have those targets actually here in the calibration center right now. So feel free to contact us with your contact information, and we would love to have that conversation regarding the Lexus 360 targets.
Come on, Bryce.
Thank you all so much for joining us today and learning more about calibrations. If you have any more questions, that Slido link will be live until the end of the day. Just be sure to include your name so we can respond to you. And we look forward to seeing you all next month for the next asTech Industry Pulse.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.